previous rounds. For the first time this year, we specified the way that racial equity and climate are being considered as criteria in selecting the awardees and meeting our responsibility to distribute these funds that are provided by Congress. Projects were also reviewed for their use of innovative technology and for how they could be delivered in a cost-effective manner. We're also addressing historic underinvestment in rural areas. 44% of today's funding announcement goes to rural areas, which is considerably more than the 25% required by law. Let me share a few examples of some of the awards that we are putting forward. The Seattle Department of Transportation will be awarded $11 million to make significant bridge repairs on the West Seattle high-rise bridge, which is currently closed due to structural deficiencies, which has been incredibly disruptive, as well as the Spokane Street Swing Bridge. And it's going to use its innovative local hiring strategy to hire workers from the community, which is a project informed by collaboration with the Seattle Race and Social Justice Initiative. In the Midwest, the city of Dubuque, Iowa, will be awarded $5 million to increase capacity and make improvements to the Port of Dubuque, including upgrading the rail equipment and track and installing a rail-to-barge direct transfer system. This is a project that will create jobs in the region and reduce costs for shippers. And it's another reminder of ways that climate action and job creation go hand in hand, because this is a project that will reduce emissions by shifting some loads from truck transport to maritime. In Georgia, the Georgia Ports Authority will be awarded almost $47 million to build new inland container port along the I-85, I-985 corridor. This will be linked to the Port of Savannah by direct 324-mile intermodal freight rail service and create meaningful economic opportunities in the region, while also significantly reducing the vehicle miles traveled by truck, again with reductions in carbon emissions, pollution, the climate and public health impact that goes with that. There are terrific projects also in Pennsylvania and Los Angeles that my colleagues are going to discuss in a minute. And across the country, you're seeing big and important projects. But I have to tell you, there were so many compelling and worthy presentations that came in. What we could award in this round was only about 1/7 of the amount requested, which amounted to almost $7 billion across 157 eligible applications. And we just didn't have funding for all of the projects that were worthy of consideration. And I think that reflects a bigger picture where the total infrastructure repair backlog in this country is estimated at about $1 trillion. So these grants, which are great news in their own right, I think are also examples of what we could replicate at a greater scale, passing the historic bipartisan infrastructure framework that President Biden reached and announced last week. This is a framework that will make our infrastructure more resilient to extreme weather, which is something especially on our mind as we see what's happening in the Northwest in this extreme heat situation, and reduce emissions. It represents the largest federal investment in public transit in history, the largest federal investment in passenger rail since the creation of Amtrak, resources to help America win the EV market, and so much more. So we're delighted by today's news, thrilled by what is possible with further bipartisan action, and determined to make sure that we continue creating jobs and making communities better off by supporting the terrific work that they're doing on the ground. And with that, happy to turn it over to Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary Buttigieg. Do people still call you Mayor Pete a lot?
All the time. I take it as a compliment.
Okay, well, it's great. And I want to thank you, the Department of Transportation. As I said, one of the things was we wanted to stay on topic here, but the primary theme of what I'm saying is thank you to the Department of Transportation and to you. This $70 million in grants for investments in two really strategically important infrastructure projects in Pennsylvania. This is a really big deal for us here in Pennsylvania. And there are three things. The grant obviously is a recognition of the crying need for infrastructure investments in the United States that is long overdue nationally. Second, it's a recognition of Pennsylvania as a worthy focus of this kind of investment. I know I'm selling here, but this is Pennsylvania is really important. And it's also a recognition of the special importance of these two specific projects, the Route 61 corridor in Schuylkill County and the Port of Philadelphia. So Let me start with the sort of the general idea of infrastructure. As both the president and the secretary have acknowledged countless times, we need to invest in our nation's crumbling infrastructure. This is nothing new. We really need to do this. We've avoided making these investments for far too long. We need to return to the common attachment we all seem to have at one point to the idea that a robust infrastructure has always been at the heart of our national prosperity, our national success. It's therefore fitting that the Biden administration has not only brought us back to the recognition of infrastructure's importance, the president's also brought that definition up to date. Thus, childcare, education, climate change, broadband, they're all part of his vision of infrastructure in the 21st century. And this updated idea of infrastructure has given new life, I think, to our national journey toward a widely shared prosperity that we want to get back to. I think it's especially fitting that as the president's infrastructure vision is being refined by the legislative process, that Pennsylvania is already the recipient of $70 million in this whole project. This is the place where infrastructure has always been. I mean, we're the Keystone State, Pennsylvania is. So we've always been a hub of transportation. We have 3 world-class ports: Philadelphia, Deepwater Port, Pittsburgh, one of the finest river ports in the world, and Erie, which is one of the great freshwater ports in the world. We have world-class cities, world-class universities that make us a hub for enterprise and economic development. And so this grant is a concrete recognition of the importance of investments like this to who we are as a Commonwealth. And I really appreciate it. And I think all Pennsylvanians appreciate it for that reason. Finally, these 2 projects specifically are important to us. The Route 61 corridor project in Schuylkill County will do great things for that county and that region in rural Pennsylvania. The project is going to connect Interstates 78 and 81 on a corridor that already is used by over 19,000 vehicles each and every day. It's going to be even more heavily traveled after this project is finished. And the second thing is the Port of Philadelphia, which is also central to Pennsylvania's future. Part of this $70 million grant will be used to construct a multi-use berth in Philadelphia's rapidly growing port. Philadelphia, the state has been making big investments. The federal government, Department of Transportation, I don't know how many years in deepening the Delaware River channel. This is a big deal. This investment in the port is going to bring new vitality to the region and new economic opportunities to Pennsylvanians who live in that region. So, Secretary Buttigieg, thank you again for recognizing the importance of infrastructure investment. Thanks to the Biden administration. Thank you for recognizing the importance of infrastructure in Pennsylvania, especially. And thank you again for recognizing the importance of these 2 specific projects. I really appreciate it. Now, it's my great honor to introduce the now person who's been mayor of Los Angeles for 8 years, Eric Garcetti. Mayor Garcetti.
Thank you so much, Governor Wolf. And you were a great host when we were in Philadelphia just over 2 years ago with myself and Secretary Buttigieg, and it's great to be with you. And I'm so proud to serve alongside a once and always mayor, because there's no such thing as a former mayor, and an extraordinary secretary, Pete Buttigieg, his great team. And to go from, at least when we were there, City of Brotherly Love to the City of Angels, to celebrate really what is the spreading of not dollars and programs, miles and engineering feats, but human connection, because that's what infrastructure we've been talking about. I know the 3 of us for a long time really is about. And under your leadership, Secretary Buttigieg, you're reconnecting infrastructure and people. And under this administration, we're connecting it with the ambition that has defined America. So it's so exciting to be with both of you and to celebrate and to paint a picture here on the West Coast of how impactful these dollars are. We're proud of the taxes that we pay, and we're excited when they come back to us here to be able to build out not just some of the largest projects in the country, but also some of the most human and humanistic projects in the country, ones that will save lives, that will create jobs, that will clean up our environment and do so much more. Today in Los Angeles, we're celebrating 2 awards of infra. One is an $18 million grant coming to the city of Los Angeles that will be in South Los Angeles, an amazing, one of those great heartland neighborhoods of African-American culture and increasingly Latino culture too, that for so long has defined opportunity for many in my city and exported great culture to our country and our world, but that is too unsafe right now to too many people who have few options besides trying to get a car, being in a car, being stuck in traffic or dodging those cars because we haven't had the safety improvements. This $18 million will go towards safety improvements, complete streets, encouraging people to walk, to bike, to take transit, and to encourage sort of community planning that I just came from, where we had a groundbreaking along a transit line of affordable housing for folks that are unhoused and people who are low income. In the same neighborhood my Mexican immigrant grandfather came to and had his home taken for an infrastructure project when a freeway was built, only to move to another neighborhood and 20 years later have that home taken by a freeway construction too. This administration gets it, and I think increasingly this country gets it. Infrastructure ignored and infrastructure done badly harms people, but infrastructure done well helps people. And the second grant is $30 million for LA Metro, the nation's second busiest metropolitan transit authority that I chair right now, which is going to help fix a notoriously dangerous freeway a bottleneck, a place that a choke point that has caused accidents, that has taken the goods from our port, Mr. Governor, and we too are very proud of our port, the twin ports of LA and Long Beach, which bring about 40% of the goods into America from sea. They hit trucks that oftentimes get in accidents that have killed people, and this is going to be good for American commerce as well as for the neighborhoods and the drivers there too. So, today as we celebrate this, it's good to be on this call to celebrate these infra awards to so many deserving projects, but also to support the bipartisan infrastructure framework that would be one of the largest investments in infrastructure in the nation's history. To join this call to push for jobs, address the global climate crisis, and to make our country more stronger and more equitable as well. And to do so under the leadership of the Biden-Harris administration, who I think get this once in a lifetime opportunity. Mayors across the country and governors know that. We're in the trenches. Infrastructure is the glue that holds us together, that connects us to the people we spend our lives with. And I want to thank USDOT for its investment in Los Angeles and for the deep work that you've done. And this bipartisan framework and the continuing work of the administration will position us to win the 21st century. It will deliver high-speed internet to every American home. It's the largest investment in infrastructure in a century. It's the largest investment in rail since the creation of Amtrak. It's the largest investment in public transit in American history, and the largest investment in clean energy transmission in American history, as well as in clean drinking water and wastewater. Thank you for that leadership. We will spend these dollars wisely, and we will see it be part of a rising America that not only can compete globally, but that takes care of everybody and leaves no one behind. Back to you, Secretary.
Thanks so much, Mayor. And Ben, I think we're ready to go to questions now.
Yep, you got it. And just a reminder, everybody, if to ask a question, there's a Q&A box at the bottom. You can also just raise your hand and we can call on you that way. And just one note on any specific grants, they're now up on our website at transportation.gov/infra. So any kind of specific details on the projects you can find there. And with that, looks like we've got Sam Mintz at Politico with a question. Sam, you there?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Secretary. Thanks for making time for this call. I wanted to ask you more about specifically the new climate and equity criteria that you mentioned, and obviously we've been following your original announcement on this. Can you talk about how that was used? For example, like did every project selected ultimately have to make substantial improvements to racial equity and fighting climate change to even be considered for inclusion here?
No, it's not a threshold criterion. So these are among several statutory considerations and criteria that come into play. But what I will say is we want to make it clear from the beginning that this is going to be very important for us in terms of how we meet what we view to be the intent of the program. If you go back to the authorizing statute, right there, it talks about the environment, and yet, even though climate change is obviously the dominant environmental issue of our time, we haven't really seen that made explicit in the past in terms of what we mean by how we interpret that kind of congressional expectation that we are going to look after environmental considerations. So when you could show, like in some of the examples I gave, right, you can show a diversion from a more carbon-intensive mode to another one for cargo by taking advantage of the ability to move goods over water. That's something that we can take into consideration. based on our prioritization of climate within the framework of the congressional mandate for looking at environmental considerations with equity as well. And here really the operative word from my perspective in the authorizing statute is the word people. The truth is that historically infrastructure didn't always serve all people equally. And so when an applicant could demonstrate, sometimes just by virtue of being in a region that was underserved, other times in a more direct way in terms of the vision of a particular program. I mentioned a local hire, for example, being part of the vision in West Seattle. That's something that we were able to look at too. Ultimately we think this is, by our lights, the most responsible way that you could spend these dollars, and wanted to be very clear up front about how things like equity and things like climate mattered in that range of things we need to think about.
Thanks, Secretary. Next question, we've got Errol Barnett with CBS. You should be good to go now. Errol, you there?
See Earl on the screen, but muted.
You might be muted personally, Errol, on your device. Okay, we'll come back to you. Let's go to Ian Duncan with the Washington Post.
Hi, can you hear me all right?
Yes,
sure can.
Yeah, Secretary Buttigieg, just to follow on Sam's question, really, I mean, I'm just quickly looking through this list of all the awards, and I mean, it does look like there are quite a lot of fairly traditional highway projects on here. Are you worried that some of these are going to increase VMT and kind of be counterproductive from an environmental standpoint, or based on sort of the applications that you saw, do you have reasons to think that they're actually going to have some environmental benefits?
Well, of course, each has a somewhat different story, but ultimately, this is a program that is set up for highway and freight. Right? That's what it does, and so we know that this is part of a bigger picture. Where, for example, whatever's happening with vehicle flow through programs like this, we also need to make that vehicle flow less carbon intensive through things like electric vehicles, which is why the president is so insistent on making sure that we have the right kind of charging infrastructure, and that's why the administration continues to support measures to improve the affordability of electric vehicles. Sometimes mode shifting can be part of the solution. Sometimes it's about optimizing the flow of what happens on our highways, but this is part of the bigger picture. I will say that anytime a project can demonstrate that there is a multimodal quality, and a number of the projects in here, I think 11 of them could demonstrate that they supported some kind of improvement around multimodalism or safety. Those are things that meet that bigger picture that we're trying to fit it into, even though this is a program that's of course specific to highway and freight.
And just real quick, I'm an example of that with the second award. This is not going to increase our climate emissions. It's going to decrease it, because to the Secretary's point, this is where notoriously we have accidents that sometimes will take 2 hours to clear, where when there's not accidents, there's traffic. When we get that flow moving, these goods have to move, period. But together with administration, we are looking at that electrification of trucks, that infrastructure. But in the meantime, we expect this to be a reduction of emissions through this grant.
Thank you both. Let's try Errol one more time with CBS. We will unmute you now and try this again. Errol, you there? All right, we'll get your questions answered at another time. Reminder: any questions, please just raise your hand, and we'll try to come back to Errol here in a second. I think we're good here, unless anyone has any final questions. Quiet bunch today. All right. Well, that is a wrap. Thank you so much, Secretary, Governor, and Mayor for joining. Everyone on the line, you'll be getting our press release, and again, transportation.gov for more information about the grants. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks, everyone.